Bum ba dum bum. Bum ba dum. Hello, everybody. It's been a really powerful week for me. I think it's been a powerful week for a lot of people. I didn't realize how many people have been moved by this gentleman, Scott Adams. I wish I had appreciated him even more before he passed away. Maybe that's just something that happens for a lot of people, that something about their motivations, their intentions, a little bit more of the truth behind what drove them. I look back at it now and I think, wow. Every day to show up and to drink some coffee with fellow human beings. It was a real powerful testament to me. And so I wanted to share a little bit about that. Although I want to be clear, I don't think anybody can replace Scott Adams. That's definitely not why I'm here. I'd say I'm here maybe trying to follow in his example a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about what I think that is. What did he do that was so moving? All right. No, I haven't done the simultaneous sip yet. No, I was, but let's go ahead and do that. Although I don't have the official mug, and I also don't know the introduction by heart, but I'll do my best. All right, here we go. The simultaneous sip. All you need is a cup or a mug or glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I do like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better, the simultaneous sip. 1, 2, 3. Let's go. That was my first sip of the day. So maybe a little bit about why I'm doing this. What is this? And a little bit about me. I would say one thing that really struck me over the past week or so since Scott's passing is that the way that he engaged online it really struck me because I did something similar with my daughters. So I wasn't by myself. It was when the pandemic hit. When the pandemic hit, I was trying to think of things I could do to help kind of inspire them. I don't know, start the day off. Just being curious. And I've always been a really curious guy. So we'd sit on the couch. We called it Froen Girls because I was growing a giant afro at the time. Not on purpose. It just does that. We'd sit down and I'd have my coffee and my daughters would have their beverages. My wife usually drank coffee. Sometimes she joined, sometimes she didn't. But during the week, we do a simultaneous sip, although it was a shorter version. I never learned. I also didn't want to plagiarize, Scott Adams. If I keep doing this, then I want to be able to support um, whatever he had in mind. I think he's got a show going. I listened to one. Um, but yeah, it was just me and my family, and we would usually my daughters would come up with a topic to talk about. So we'd sit down. Isla's 7, or was 7 at the time. Sumi was 10, and they'd tell me the topic, but we'd do our sip, and it was just join me in the simultaneous sip. 1, 2, 3, and we'd do it. So what I liked about that was, well, one, we never scripted anything, and I think that there's something to that that's important. I think that's something that Scott did that was so very inspiring and moving to people. Although at the time I didn't appreciate how challenging that is for a lot of people. I did a lot of public speaking and performing arts and things when I was young, so I got comfortable in front of crowds. So it didn't stand out to me at the time as something that is actually really important to just have to every single day go up and do a live stream where you would share your thoughts about the world. I know you often commented on the news. Is really challenging. I think in part because, well, a lot of people are anxious. A lot of people worry about what other people think about them, and would be worried about screwing up or saying something wrong or upsetting somebody. But to keep doing that and to be so authentic, I think that's also something that he saw in Donald Trump that I didn't appreciate. The first, I'd say like even the first few years after he threw his support behind Donald Trump back in 2015, 2016. I think both of them have Scott Adams and Donald Trump, an authenticity to them, a willingness to be honest and open and transparent. So I'm a big fan of that. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge fan of that. And so that's one reason why I wanted to do this, because I think that thank you. I think that especially in today's world, honesty and transparency is one of those ways that people on the internet can go and try to cut through some of the noise, because there's a lot of noise, especially with some of these new technologies like deep fakes, just large language models that can generate so much text. I think it's going to be increasingly difficult for humans to be able to find reliable, authentic, honest sources. And that's something that I think we lost with Scott Adams passing. He was someone who I didn't agree with everything that he said. I mean, not even close. I mean, I do agree with a lot of things that he says, but I think that that's part of the point, is that we have different perspectives, and it's important to share what those perspectives are honestly, because that's the only way we're going to be able to learn from each other. That's really it. I think it takes a lot of practice to be able to think in real time about what we're really thinking and feeling, to formulate our own ideas about how the world works and cause-effect relationships, to share those, and then to listen to other perspectives and to try to work that into our understanding to know whether or not one should work that into their understanding. And I think Scott Adams did that in a way that was so brilliant. One of the things that was mentioned during his funeral that I loved over and over again, people were talking about the acts of kindness. Someone mentioned that they had played tennis with him for 10 years or so before his passing. And that when the tennis ball would hit the line, that he would say, "Oh, I didn't score. That's your point." And it's similar in some ways to Charlie Kirk's funeral. A lot of people that knew him personally were coming out and saying, "Hey, behind the scenes, when nobody was looking, or only one person that was, in his life, that Charlie Kirk and Scott Adams were the kinds of people that far more often than not were going out of their way to try to lift other people up, to be the bigger person, and to stand on principle, to not act out of anger, which is something that I've historically had a bit of a challenge with." So cheers to you, Scott Adams and Charlie Kirk. May you both rest in peace. All right. Well, maybe a little bit about me. I do have cabinets. So that's one reason why it's like, well, where should I set this up? I just got this idea yesterday during the funeral. I was imagining these tens of thousands of people that have been waking up every morning and on their schedule showing up at 10 a.m. to hear this beautiful man talk about, well, one, just being so positive. I love that. I think that that's so important. I know that Elon's been talking a lot about that, the importance of optimism. I've kind of been like that a long time, frankly. I think that if one has peace of mind, it's easier to have clarity. And if one has more clarity, it's easier to stay positive. And Scott Adams definitely seemed to navigate reality extremely well. He was good at imagining what he wanted, and then being able to execute on that without getting hit by a lot of things that he wasn't expecting. It's a lot for a potato. And he definitely did that with these live streams and his books and the mission that he set out for himself to have as many people as, and it's a great metric, as many people as he could inspire and help to willingly and freely come to his funeral and want to share in that event, and also to go back and look at this wealth of all of the wisdom and the stories and the mental models that he shared over the years. Like, wow. I mean, really, wow. I think it's very inspiring. It wouldn't surprise me. In fact, it would just so delight me to if I think other people that were inspired by Scott Adams attempted to try to, I don't necessarily recommend that everybody try to do what he was doing. I think that can be dangerous, frankly. If you don't have a lot of experience with this kind of thing, the internet can be cruel. People can be cruel, but if one is a mind and they feel like they have enough experience and have a few stories to tell, I think the most important thing is just being honest and open and transparent. But I would love to see that. I'd love to be a part of that. if you're hearing this and you find that fascinating, the idea of being of creating that kind of, I guess some people might call that legacy. Um, to me, I think it's more of a gift. I think he left a gift. He left enormous gifts for people. I one of the things that I did after he passed away is I pulled up his show from my daughter's birthdays last year. I mean, he live streamed just about every day. So I could go back to that day. And they remember what they were doing on their birthday last year. But to just play what he was sharing that day. And that's so cool. That's so beautiful. To Scott Adams. I do like coffee. That's true. There are a number of things that I feel like I resonated with Scott Adams on. And when I layer all them together, it kind of reminds me a bit of the skill stacking that he talked about. I usually have a lot on my mind. So talking for long periods of time, even if it's in a monologue, that's something I was like, oh, I'm not the only one. He also described himself as an independent, and how I've been listening to a lot of Scott Adams stuff. I've basically been listening to his stuff nonstop for like the past week or so, since his passing. But during one of these discussions, I think it was the one with Joe Rogan. Yeah, going back, it was like 9 years ago. And he was talking about how he was an independent and how he didn't even vote for Trump, which is kind of funny because he's like, I mean, he's had a huge influence on supporting Trump. But the act of the voting, he was like, oh, I'm worried that, I don't want to lose my independence. As soon as you throw your hat on one side of the ring, then, that's your team. And then that messes with your frame. You talked a lot about frames, the importance of having a frame that helps you to achieve your goals, the ability to even change one's frame. I mean, wow, he was incredible at articulating all these various ways of changing one's frame. I actually used one of his strategies yesterday to help finish setting up at least part of our home theater. We've got it's not really a home theater. It's just a TV. But we put it in this room in the basement that was unfinished. But I set up the sound and I set up the carpet and a couch in a way that like kind of felt special. Like it kind of felt a little bit like a home theater, even though it's really just a TV and some speakers. I was imagining how cool it'd be instead of thinking about how much work it would be. And it worked. Actually, I did the same thing with this. I just had this idea last night or yesterday during the funeral, but then I shared it with my family. I'm married, been married for 19 years, 2 daughters. And I was like, wow, wouldn't that be something to be able to try to help add gifts from my own life. I think that we all have gifts. I think maybe I should back up a second and express a little bit about my own philosophy on what it was that Scott Adams did and why it's something that I think that he would even encourage other people to do it. I think it's more about whether or not you're doing it for the right reasons. So, I think that he was just one of the most honest, transparent really thoughtful people in the world, which is really saying something. It's hard to know who people are because everybody says that they're good. Everybody seems to kind of put off this air of like, well, of course I'm a good person and I make good decisions, and all of my failings are because of things that were outside of my control. But he really just owned his mind. He owned his thoughts, but he was willing to share them for free without manipulating them too much. I don't think that you can do live streams every day for years and be just secretly trying to manipulate people or something. If he was trying to just get people's approval or win some popularity contest, then he wouldn't have just been live streaming in his kitchen. I think that's part of the beauty of what he did, and how he was going about engaging with the world. Like he was so willing to share all the good stuff, but he wasn't going to go beyond what he needed to do in order for him to just try to be helpful. And I think that's so cool. I think that's so great. I'm going to get some more coffee. I moved my coffee maker close by. I do love coffee. I think I feel like if you were going to try to, even if it's just for a few of his followers, provide a 10 a.m. simultaneous sip, like there are some things that you've got to have if you're going to even attempt to do that. Otherwise, just don't even say simultaneous sip. Just don't even all get up in the mix of Scott Adams and all that was, because you can't replace a guy like Scott Adams. That's not the point. But one is you got to like coffee. I need to get his mug too. That's another thing. I feel bad. It's like I should probably draw something, but no, everybody would know. So you got to like coffee. Another one is, I think that being an independent was really important. So, and he talked about that with Joe Rogan, but he talked about that a lot. To be independently minded, that's what led him to understanding and appreciating what Donald Trump was doing, even when he was struggling more. Like his first presidency, first time through, it's not going to look as organized. He's never done it before. But the way that Scott Adams could see, at least be able to put up plausible explanations for why Trump was doing what he was doing, to be able to point to show the thread of logic that was there, required an independent mind. And so that's something that if I keep doing this, I hope to bring. So it won't be Scott Adams, that's for sure. Because nobody can be Scott Adams. But I can try to be independent and open and honest about what I think and articulate that so that others can be the judge. That's certainly what Scott Adams did for me. I didn't agree with him on everything, but I loved how he was honest and open and allowed other people to see the logic in his reasoning, and then come to their own conclusions without feeling judged by Scott, which is another thing that he did. I can't remember who mentioned this during his funeral, but he was so consistently uplifting. He would poke fun at people. But even when he did that, like there was something about the way that he communicated where, he wasn't trying to upset anybody. He was trying to lift people up. And thank goodness for that. Like the world has so much negativity. That's another thing. I think if somebody's going to come up and try to use the phrase simultaneous sip and to try to carry on something of what Scott Adams started, I think they need to be positive. I think they need to be positive. And that doesn't mean sugarcoating things when it's bad. It just means that there's always a way, there's always a frame, I think, for being able to see things for what they are. And when you can see things for what they are, usually anger is not really the right emotion. A lot of the pain and suffering I think people experience relate to things that will cause affect relationships. What were the preconditions prior to the circumstance? Like one example, we can talk a little bit about Greenland. He passed away right before Trump mentioned how important Greenland was to national security. And so one thing Scott Adams did really well, I think, was just pointing out the logic and the reason behind things. And so I can, provide an example with Greenland. Greenland is a very unique geopolitical problem because over the past 30 years, two things changed pretty radically. One was the temperature. So the North Pole used to be covered in a lot more ice, the Arctic Ocean. And so there weren't shipping lanes there as much. And new technologies have also made it so that it's a lot easier to live in places that are less hospitable. Think Starlink, think Powerwall, solar power, but also just the types of weapons that are used. So this might be the first time in human history where you've had more rapid changes in the environment, but then also just incredibly rapid changes in technology that created a change in circumstances for a country, or at least a large piece of the planet that really is new. This is a new precedent. I mean, those two factors weren't driving changes in how world leaders would view a particular part of the global geography. The climate didn't change as fast, and technology wasn't changing as fast. So I think that's another thing that Scott Adams did really well, was providing first principled, logical explanations for things, but he never stopped learning. That was another one. He didn't change his mind. He was capable of changing his mind. To Scott Adams. He was open to new information. He would learn from the people that were in his community. He would ask them questions sometimes. It was very conversational. That level of confidence is quite rare. To be so open to being influenced, I think requires having the strength of conviction in one's own paradigm. He built his own views. So knowing that those views were something that were strong enough for him to hold on to, he could be open to other opinions without feeling like a certain loss of faith is in his own perspective. All right. Well, some other things that Scott and I have in common. Let's see. Well, His views on Christianity, I don't think, are very well known, but I'll touch on that. I would say that for the longest time, I considered myself to be an atheist. Um, but over the past year or two, I think I've become confused there. So I used to be an atheist. Now I'm confused. Um, I think that it's really hard to grow older through life and believe that what we're consciously able to perceive is all there is. Um, and I think that there's a lot about the human mind that is not very well understood. That's something that I may go into more detail in a future live stream. But to suffice to say, I think that's an area where I resonated. I think that one thing that Scott Adams did was he lived the values that he thought were the right ways to live as best he could. And I think that's as good as anybody can do. If we're thoughtful about keeping our eyes open and trying to be honest with ourselves about the difference between right and wrong, the kinds of things that we believe to be good, that we're learning from our own experiences, because I think part of this is about this journey of discovery and discovering what should be taking priority. And then actively taking intentional steps to try to bring more goodness into this world. If somebody does that, I have a really hard time imagining how they would function in a place called hell. I don't think one can do better than that. That's a personal opinion. You're trying to understand what it means to live a good life, and then you're striving to live it, knowing that you're going to be learning along the way. I think he did that. I have a tremendous amount of respect for anybody that's trying to do that, because it's hard, because we don't know. There's one word I use for God sometimes is omnifinity. This idea of like all these omni words, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, just call it omnifinity. Just all the omni words, all these infinity concepts of like the infinity of love and compassion, the infinity of knowledge and wisdom, the infinity across time and space. I mean, like these are concepts. And as human beings with our very limited consciousness, that's only capable of really thinking of a few words per second, it's just incredibly challenging for us to conceive of even a million. How are we supposed to conceive of infinity across even one dimension? But that seems to be the reality that we're living in. Just this extraordinary, infinitely complex across infinite dimensions. It can be overwhelming. So I think failing is just a byproduct of trying. And I think that Scott Adams tried really hard. I think he provided a great example of how to try. And I think the world needs more examples of people trying without trying to put on a show. Yeah. Well, at at some point, if I keep doing this, which I'm not sure about, I figured I'd try it out, see what happens, see how I feel. But at some point, I'm hoping that as I'm hanging out here in the kitchen, that my wife and my kids might occasionally show up so you can meet them. I spent a lot of time with my family. I worked for about 15 years. I worked in the finance industry. The last 7 years, I actually worked as a public servant. I was a GS-15, which is pretty high level public servant with the G20. So I was helping to implement rules post the housing bubble, regulations, Dodd-Frank, Basel III. And so I primarily did two things. I supported, I was a huge advocate for the leverage ratio, which is a capital rule that essentially says you don't know what's going to blow you up. Stop trying to pretend that you know what's risky and what's not. Just hold capital, hold money, hold enough money that when something bad happens, you're not stuck there with your pants down. That was the speech that I gave over and over again in Basel, Switzerland, to the top 20 most influential, powerful countries in the world. Hey, how's it going? Are you gonna come visit and say hi to everybody? There she is. There she is. That's daughter number 2.
Hello.
What's up, sweetie?
Getting my phone. Me and Sume figured out a training thing to help us complete our goal of doing one pull-up.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay.
So we're gonna try to do that.
Yeah, go for it. Sounds great. All right. Yay. So I worked in finance. I was consulting before that, and made some really good investments. One was in Tesla, which I know that Scott Adams was a big fan of. Not one of those things that you would need probably to be in order to try to help carry forward Scott Adams' memory, but it helps. I think that Elon Musk being such a huge optimist, we own a Tesla, and we bought into we bought Tesla before its big run up in 2019, which was great. So I've made some, I guess you could say, either some smart or some lucky investments that have helped me to be in a position where I'd have more time and flexibility to even do something like this. It takes, even if you're really good at speaking off the cuff and you're not nervous about doing live streams, it still takes time. And so I do have time. I actually think that this kind of time, I was actually doing something like this before live streaming. I was just doing it privately with friends, like my friend Mboya Michael over here, who has, I guess he can bear witness. Hey, Mboya, feel free to share there in the chat how many years we've been doing simultaneous sips together. And it wasn't just Mboya. I'd say, oh man, I mean, everybody that came through Weekwell School. A little background. So during the pandemic, started doing a live stream. Yep, 5 years. Yeah. Cheers. So during the pandemic, we were having a blast. My family was having a real blast. I know a lot of people were suffering, but for me, like getting to stay home with my kids was very, very fun for me. I had the greatest time. And so I mentioned this first podcast that we did called Throwing Girls. And Isla was 7, Sume was 10. And we would talk about whatever question they had on their mind. Part of this was public speaking, helping them get comfortable, sharing their thoughts. Didn't have like a whole lot of people watching. You can see there aren't like tons of subscribers on this channel. I'd say half the reason for this channel is free cloud storage. So, but then starting in January of 2021, they started a school because, Sume's own teacher, she was in 5th grade at the time. Her teacher said that she was doing better at home than she was at school, as like trying to give a compliment to her. But Sume took that differently. She took that as, maybe I should go back to school. And so she didn't. She just stayed home, and they started a school, and I think it was called Makeshift Homeschool for like 2 months. And then they just changed the name to Weekwell School because we already had a blog called weekwell.com. And there's a big backstory with that. But that's not really relevant to this live stream. I want this to be more about Scott Adams and his example of just sharing without all the bells and whistles. But in terms of just a little background about me and my family, we started this school, and it was an online school because of the pandemic. And so Sume started a Discord group or a Slack group, and there were something like, I think we got up to like 100 kids or so in the Falls Church, Virginia area and surrounding areas. That's where we live. Until the schools opened back up, and all the local kids, they went back to school, except my kids. And then that's when that we went online. We went online, I want to say it was like the beginning of 2022. And that was when we got really into Zoom calls. Man, we did a lot of Zoom calls. And I didn't mind it at all. I thought it was great. But I'm weird. I've learned since then that I'm weird. I don't get a huge amount of additional emotional joy or benefits from people being physically in the same space as me as opposed to being online. I think it's just because I'm just like a very conscious, dominant kind of thinker. I think a lot about ideas. I pay very close attention to the words people are saying, but I'm not as sensitive to all of the other information that might be coming into me, like what somebody's wearing, or if somebody gets a haircut, I'd be like the last person to notice, unless they just like shaved all their hair off or something, and I'd be like, oh, and then I probably wouldn't even mention it. So they start Weekwell School, and it's and you can look this up. They're quite successful with this. They were on Scripps National News. That's two piece Scripps. It's one of the larger legacy media companies. They've got like 100 different newspapers and TV shows around the country. There was also an interview that they did really early on, 2021, by a company called Go Guardian. And then they won a grant with a very large education focused grant called VELA, VELA. So they were running this online school called Wequel School that was, I'd say, like a cross between like Y Combinator meets Montessori, something like that. So a lot of project-based learning, a lot of real-world stuff. Basically, if your kids are taking whatever it is that they're doing for school, and it just ends up getting thrown away or recycled, then it's not real. Like you want your kids doing real things, and you can tell if they're real if they want to keep it, or if you can build upon it, right? And so that's what we're doing. We're doing real things, and it was really fun and exciting. But one of my roles was to meet everybody before they could come into the school. This is like, I have two daughters. They're quite young, or they were at the time. Now they're 16 and 13. But I wasn't gonna, online, fine. I'll totally fine with that. But you have to have very strict security protocols. And so I required that everybody who was applying, if they had a good application, everything checked out, that I would just have a conversation with them over the phone. And if they refused to have a conversation with me over the phone, I didn't let them in, because it just made me nervous, a little bit. Not so much for me, but just because they were so young. So we had this Discord channel, later an app of our own that Sume started building, but then we hired some folks to help her, including Michael and Boya, who's been commenting, to help with this online school. But one of the things that I learned during this is how much I really enjoyed engaging with people online. I just didn't enjoy it like on Facebook. I didn't really like Facebook, or out of all these different socials, like I like X, but I also just the structure and the forum of it. I think it's very, very hard to build authentic, meaningful, close, emotionally real relationships on these social platforms. So that's a challenge and a struggle. But in terms of just the engagement, I really enjoyed it. I just met lots of people, and I'm very extroverted. Like I'm the most extroverted person I know, which is really saying something. Like if I was the most introverted person that I knew, be like, well, how would I know? Wouldn't have enough data to really have much to claim anything by. But the most extroverted, yeah, I probably meet an average of like a couple thousand people a year at least, just everywhere I go. So I really like meeting new people, and I really like to, and I don't mind being online. Although it is easier now with my daughters being older. So that's something that's new for me. Is that I feel more comfortable being able to engage online, and being more, honest and open and forthcoming about myself, given that I don't have like little kids anymore. My kids are, they're teenagers, but they're also just very, very capable. Like I haven't parented in a long time, at least like 2-3 years. So So all of this is background that maybe can put me in a little bit of context. Maybe you can kind of see me in the context of Scott Adams, and imagining me 10 years ago finding his book, How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big. That was my first exposure to Scott, and I love that book. I love that book so much that I actually recommended it to Sume. She's my 16-year-old. And she listened to it and she thought it was great too. One of my favorite interviews that he did was actually the one with Jordan Peterson 6 months ago, where he talked a little bit more about his backstory of how he came to become a cartoonist. I love that interview. One second, I'm gonna get a little more. Okay. So, out of all of his books, that's the only one that I've read. I think if I were to keep doing this, I think I might need to start methodically going back through his material. Definitely read his books, but then maybe share more about what I'm thinking, what I'm learning as I'm going through it, which is that would be a huge commitment. But I think for somebody like Scott Adams, it might be worth it. I think it might be worth it. Definitely after this funeral. One of the things about his funeral that I came away with was that I think he really was one of these diamonds in the rough, the 1 in a million types that just did such incredibly powerful things for people by being okay. So let me touch on the Christianity thing a bit. One of the people during his funeral came right out and said that it seemed like Scott Adams was like the best Christian that they knew, but that Scott just didn't know he was a Christian. I think that's true. I think that's true. Like if you look at the Sermon on the Mount and the teachings of Jesus Christ, it definitely seems to me that a lot of what is really trying to be communicated, in my opinion, about how to live one's life in a way that's virtuous and meaningful, that he appears to have done that. And so if that's the case, and he's got 8-9 years worth of live streams, 4 books, and just so much that he's created, that he's left us this enormous treasure trove of content and material. And I don't think that the purpose of all that is to just be synthesized. I think that one thing about trying to understand somebody is that it's very difficult to understand someone at a glance, right? Because consciously we're only capable of thinking of a few words per second. Like consciously we only have enough processing power as like a low resolution photo. But of course our subconscious and our entire minds, there's just so much more going on. But we have to express it through these things called words. And words are models. They're models of things. They're not the actual things. Like the word for tree is not a tree. It's just the word tree. And it's meant to represent trees in general. But by using the word tree, you're taking something that's infinitely complicated, like a tree. I mean, every tree is unique. Every tree is made up of trillions and trillions and trillions of cells. Um, there's a lot going on. If you just keep looking more deeply at anything, it can get more and more and more. There's just an infinite amount of depth. You can just keep going, like a human being. But we don't have the ability to communicate that because we're not Vulcans. We can't just well, I guess this is the live long and prosper, but the Vulcan mind meld where they would just put their hands on each other's heads and just and somehow be able to convey things about who they are. That's not something that humans have learned how to do yet. And so we're, for now, stuck using these crude things called words to try to communicate who we are and how we perceive reality, right? So if you're going to do that, you can't do that with an essay. You can't even really do that with a book. You can't really do that ever. You can just try to increasingly do more of that by being honest and open and sharing who you are and how you're perceiving reality, your lived thoughts and experiences honestly, and hopefully with the intent of trying to be useful to other people. If you do that consistently over a long period of time, then I think that that's one of the gifts you can give to people is you can give them the gift of your honest perspective, your story. And that I think is the biggest lesson and takeaway that I have from Scott Adams' life. He inspired me. He still inspires me. And I miss him. Even though I didn't know him. And I hope to meet more of the people that he helped lift up in this very confusing and challenging world that we live in today. And I hope that whatever it is that I'm supposed to do to learn from his example, to learn from the people that spoke at his funeral, to learn from, all the various competing motivations and goals in my life, that I can find a way to take his example and channel it in the right way. Maybe there's some way that I can try to work his example into my life so that I can try to learn from it, leverage it, and become a more useful human being. I think that that's a big part of this for me. To know what is it that I can do to learn from his example and then look at my life and look at my own goals, the things that we're trying to do, and find a way to do that even better. And maybe more people will show up at my funeral someday. I don't know. That's not as compelling to me. I think it's a beautiful way of thinking about it. It certainly I think it's a good rule of thumb. You know, if a lot of people are showing up to your funeral and are sad at your passing, but are grateful for your existence and everything you gave them, that's a fantastic metric. I would say for me, I think the pay it forward part. That's another thing that somebody mentioned during his funeral was that and he was the cartoonist. There was a cartoonist that was inspired by him, and he was given a big break by Scott. And oh, hey, ladies, you want to say hi?
Hello.
Hello. Those are my daughters. How are you guys doing?
Good. Good. Training to do pull-ups.
Oh yeah. Did you get your whole pull up in?
No, we have to keep training for 6 to 12 weeks according to ChatGPT.
Okay.
So currently it looks very sad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, feel free to just hang out back there. I'm just doing my thing. I got to have the cabinets in the shop. That's
Okay. Oh, okay.
all right. Yeah. Where was I? Oh, paying it forward. So this gentleman was saying that, oh, I'll do whatever you want, Scott. I'll wash your car. I'll clean your windows. Just thank you so much for everything you've done for me. And Scott said, just pay it forward. Just pay it forward. I love that. I think that that's probably my biggest motivation here. I haven't met anybody that's selfish and happy. There seems to be a really strong correlation between selfishness and people being miserable. And so, I guess that's part of the framing thing that Scott talked about a lot, is how if you can change your frame and think, well, how can I be useful? How can I be more useful? Instead of, oh no, I didn't get this thing I wanted. That's, I'm just a potato. I'm just a potato. We don't need to worry about anything that's happening to this little potato here. Doesn't need to be that big of a deal. But if I can be useful to other potatoes, these are all potatoes. Do I sound inspiring? No.
You're an inspiring potato.
Thank you. I would say. I think that frame is really healthy, to try to be useful, and that to me is motivating. My daughters are no longer running a school. We're kind of exploring a lot of different things that we're interested in doing from here. But I do think that Scott Adams, in particular, came up with an extraordinarily powerful way, an example of how to practice getting outside of that frame of worrying about our own little potato problems and just trying to be a positive force in the world, and to show up ready to do that every day, show up with a smile on our face, some coffee, and to just be honest. To be honest about how we see the world, to be honest about our failures, to be honest about what we believe to be good and right and true, to be honest about what we don't know. To be honest about the things that make us look stupid and ignorant. To not be afraid of anything that might make us want to hide from what could be reality. I think he really set a great example on how to do that. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this, but I'm glad I did this one. And we'll see. But until next time, cheers to you, Scott Adams. Thank you for being such a positive force in my life, in my family's life, and a positive force in this world. You were a light in the darkness. Take care.